Even though I was just picking it up, I was able to walk myself through the whole process. Like, the mental model for me was much easier. And so, I would say, it actually fit in my brain.
Hey folks, welcome back to Elm Town. I'm your host, Jared M. Smith. We'll be visiting with Nduati Kuria today. But first, let's talk about our sponsor, Logistically. At Logistically, we make intuitive software to help logistics teams make better decisions and improve efficiency. Logistically pays me to record Elm Town episodes, as well as pays for our production and hosting costs. We build the front end for all new features in Elm. If you're interested in our mission and enjoy writing Elm, please drop us a line, elmtown@logisticallyinc.com. I'll put a link in the show notes. Now, let me introduce Nduati Kuria. Nduati is a software engineer who recently graduated with a Master's of Engineering Artificial Intelligence from Carnegie Mellon University, Africa. He works at Qoda with folks such as Drew Dang, who was on Elm Town 36, The Risk of Elm, and Dwayne Crooks, who was on Elm Town 55, from algorithms and animation to building a decentralized finance app. Nduati's built several site prototypes in Elm, including Art Culture, a Haruki Murakami website UI, and a WebGL sculpture animation site about Marcus Aurelius. He's excited to talk about functional programming in Elm. Nduati, welcome to Elm Town.
Thanks for having me, Jared.
So, I wanted to get started by asking you, what was your original motivation for getting into computing and programming?
In high school, I studied computer science, and it was very kind of basic. We go high level through things like internet and email, very high level through networks. But at our school, I had the great opportunity to have two teachers who snuck in programming lessons, which was a part of our syllabus. So my first year of high school, I did a bit of Pascal. Then between the second year of high school and the final year, we did sprinklings of like C++, and that was a really interesting experience. Very simple things like drawing a triangle, like you draw a three-sided triangle with a length of side 3 or something like that. But it was really interesting learning the really basic things of how you think about programming. So input, processing output, solving problems, loops and things like that. And then two things which actually turned out to be really beneficial to me, kind of getting into computing and specifically into programming. In our third year, part of the syllabus is to go through the Microsoft suite of softwares, so Word, Excel, Publisher, and Access. And I remember, I think it was my third year, our teacher had this idea that we're going to build, it was during the World Cup, so we're going to build the World Cup table in Excel. So basically you have the group stages, as matches are played, you fill in the scores, it should tell you who won the group stage. And then the winners of the group stage should show up into like some tournament table, and like throughout the semester we should be able to fill out the scores and get the winner of the World Cup. And like there's that old joke that the world's most famous programming language is actually Excel, because it's being used by like all the financial guys, and we ended up doing a lot of like if conditions, things about sorting hierarchies, kind of like how, like in, let's say, the Olympics, when you have a country with many golds, and another country with many with some silvers and bronze, like you need to figure out how to do some sort of like sorting so that golds matters most, silver matters slightly less than bronze. So like doing simple scaling. So if a country has 6 golds multiplied by 1 million, you get 6 million golds. Anyway, so just really interesting tricks in programming. And finally, later on, my final year, did a bit of Visual Basic inside Access, which is like Microsoft's, it's not very common these days, but it's like a database product that they had. So you could build forms and things like that. So we started injecting Visual Basic for click interactions, like some validations which weren't out of the box. Anyway, so after all of that, I really got into computing, loved that feeling you get after you build something, and decided to study computer science in college.
Okay, neat. Yeah, and so I want to kind of go back here because you mentioned Excel as kind of being the world's most famous programming language, and I think that's true. I was at Strange Loop, this conference that Felina Hermans had presented, and one of the things she said was that basically the same thing, that Excel really is a programming language, and it sounds like you were really using it in that way. So yeah, and this is nice. So you were able to kind of sneak in this through your high school studies, and that is what inspired you to go study computer science.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. All right. So then you go to college and you study computer science. How was that?
I think many people say the same thing, that the programming they learned wasn't mostly in like high school proper. For me, a huge part of my programming journey was I had a friend who ran a small startup. They needed a Swift developer because they needed to build some iOS apps. So I said, okay, fine. I guess I'm learning Swift now. So I picked up Swift, and the programming side of things I was okay at, but the UI bit of things, I wasn't the best. But that feedback where I would build something or I would design something, some UI design somewhere using maybe Sketch, and I'll give it to my boss, and he'd say that's okay, but it's actually not okay. This could be better. You're using too many colors. This is complicated. This isn't clear. So since my first year of college, somewhere around my third year, I interned with them. Even during the semester, during my free time, I would go into the office, do some programming. When I'd fall behind because of school, it would mean that when school was over, I'd have to come and catch up with the work that was being done on the Android side. So give me a place where I could learn, where I was getting feedback by someone who actually cared, because it's their product. And then I would also have to learn to program pretty fast, because whenever school kind of got in the way, you want to call it that, I would fall behind the Android development, and I would have to come in in a week try and catch up to a month's worth of exploration and programming. So that really gave me an opportunity to learn to write production code.
Cool. Okay. And so you're kind of getting this feedback process, this loop of trying out things, and especially with the UI, and then getting some feedback and learning and adapting from that. And then also you have this additional challenge that you're trying to do this while also going to school and be productive at work. So yeah, that sounds like a challenge that would be interesting to face. And so you're kind of doing this internship, right, while you're in school in Swift, and then what happens next?
So around my third year, I decided to take an internship at a cybersecurity firm, which was interesting. Got to do a bunch of Python, some ML things, which was fun. But once that internship finished, I was now entering my final year. And in our final year of undergrad, you're expected to do, over the course of 2 semesters, you're supposed to come up with assistant projects where you come up with some fake problem you want to solve. You do a lot of design documentation, you build out the thing, then finally there's a presentation at the end of the year. And I had just in my free time, I had been playing around trying to build something in React. Had really been struggling with that, and for whatever reason, I've always kind of struggled with HTML, Flexbox, all those things. They don't sit in my head, if you can use that phrase. So after a while, I'd been watching a few Elm videos, so I said, okay, let me try out this thing. Did Elm, combined Elm and a bit of elm-ui, and something I'd been struggling with for a few weeks. I did it in a couple of days, which like for me was huge because I had tried Vue before, I had tried React before, and like the fact that I would always struggle, but now the fact that, especially with elm-ui, I didn't actually have to think about HTML. I would use the same language to describe what I want and to implement it. So if I want something to be above something, I use above instead of some complicated combination of, I don't know, relative positioning and then top, all that stuff. And so then I realized there's something really nice here. I can now start programming almost like I say, at the speed of thought. So if I want something on top, I just type on top, then I put it there. If I want a certain color on something, I just type color, and then let's say I wanted blue, I just put blue. And so after that experience, I decided I'm going to gamble with my 4th year project and kind of use Elm, and at that point I was also looking into Elixir, use Elm and Elixir and see what happens there. Yeah.
Okay. So you had tried out React and Vue and you were struggling with accomplishing things, mostly you think because it was a combination of the HTML and layout that you were trying to accomplish?
Well, HTML was one thing, and the other was, first of all, with React, there's so many things, so many ways of doing things. So components, you end up with very many files. Props, it's not obvious. Even now, I have helped people with React code and they still don't understand everything. So how props work, it wasn't clear. How to get data to go back up wasn't clear to me. And I hated having to discover bugs at runtime. So you type something, you refresh the page, it looks good, you click somewhere, then there's this undefined not found error or something blows up. So I hated that. Even though I was just picking it up, I was able to walk myself through the whole process. There's a clear structure, model, update, view, any updates to the pages, any changes to a state, all happen in one function. All the possible changes that can happen in that page are all listed in one place. The mental model for me was much easier. And so I would say it actually fit in my brain. So HTML was one thing, but also the language itself.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so you have taken this opportunity to try out Elm, right? Mm-hmm. And you're finding that it's easier to debug, and there's typically one way to do things, right, as opposed to in other frameworks. And so that sounds interesting. What was this final or 4th year project?
Okay. So for whatever reason, I decided to do so let me preface this by saying it was during COVID. So while the school was trying to figure out how to get back to online learning and things like that, I got this huge chunk of time where no one was disturbing me. There were no expectations of anything else other than work on your project. So what I was doing was I had my idea was to have real-time tracking of buses. And so the idea was, and it's kind of silly now, but it's Uber for school buses. And so the idea just being that, if you think, if I take the example of, let's say it's snowing or raining, and you don't know where the school bus is, you don't know it's going to arrive, wouldn't it just be nice if you could take out your phone, you could see the bus will arrive in 5 minutes, you could see where it is? And so it was a collection of things. So there was an IoT part, which was some GPS sensor and a GSM sensor to talk over networks that would keep track of the location of the bus, that would talk to the Elixir backend, and I would now I would know the location of all buses in a city or in some area. Then all this information would be shared in real time, both to a mobile app and our website. So the website was in Elm, and so there I was doing things like setting up WebSockets so that you can, from the website you can just see as the bus moves. So the GPS sensor reports a new location. That's pushed to WebSockets to the Elm front end. where I had like Google Maps with a pin over like an SVG bus moving around and all that. But it was really interesting because now with all that free time, I started learning like things like if you want to, let's say, record repairs happening to the vehicle, like there's a page which you see like the skeleton of a bus, so you can just see the tires, the axis and all that. And you want to say that the tire had a repair, so you click on the tire, you drag and drop it into like some form, and then now you have a form with like the tire removed where you're saying fix this tire, it costs this much. So because I had a lot of free time, we got the chance to like push like the things I could learn about Elm. So drag and drop, real time. And that's the idea of the project. So it was real time tracking of school buses, like a lot of CRUD features plus a lot of special things poured in, just for the sake of learning.
Yeah, that really sounds like an ambitious project.
Yes. My philosophy is learning is like promise you'll do it and then go and figure out how. Because like halfway into the semester, I can't wake up and say like all this Elm stuff isn't working, I'll try React. I forced myself to learn by making it ambitious. So at the end of it, like even now I look back at some of my code, I don't love all of it, like the way I'm using ports and all of that, but the structure of the code, like it feels fine to me. The components, the way I use views, styling, things like that, they all feel fine. And I think that was because if you write enough code, like you'll be forced to learn the proper patterns of doing things, especially in Elm, where the language drives you towards like realizing certain things are correct and other things would make your life painful.
Yeah. I've heard that before, that the Elm kind of drives you toward best practices. Do you have a particular thing in mind and how Elm does that for you?
So an excellent one, which I've seen also at work, is how you end up like coming up with components. So if everything at the end of the day ends up being that kind of the Elm architecture, so you have a model which renders out a view, and that view can generate updates, and like that's how the language is structured. That's how the runtime works. The moment you now start building up a lot of complexity, and you start realizing this one component is carrying, like let's say half of your update function is half of your update function is related to one like single component on your page. So this like the obvious thing to do is, okay, let's just put this inside like another union. So we'll have I don't know, user clicks this, and then user updated this component. And then inside there, you'll have all your options for that one component. And then maybe you'll come up with another function that handles the update for that one component. And like slowly you start pushing things away. So like, because views are just functions, it's very easy to just pull that view into a different file. It's also very easy to pull out all the updates related to one component into the same file, and then eventually the same model. So you can basically pull out the T architecture just for a single component into its own file, and someone who knows how a page works can go and look at the components, and it makes perfect sense. And so you can end up kind of replicating this the T. I don't know if I say T architecture, but the T architecture, like, and keep on building abstractions on top of that, because first, refactoring is painless. You know exactly when you've pulled something out, and so let's say you have a message that that's in a component, but it's not listed in that component. The compiler will tell you immediately. So refactoring is easy, but then because you already have like this T architecture, it's obvious when a component, like it feels good when a component is like really well encapsulated. So I don't know, those are some of the things. It's easy to kind of stumble into a good architecture, at least that from my experience.
Yeah. So you're describing the process of scaling Elm apps out, as it gets bigger and you're finding these things are related, you kind of, like you said, push those things into their own functions and view function, update function, message variants, and then at some point you may decide to pull those into their own module and then encapsulate that because you say, okay, we're going to do this maybe in other places, or we want to separate this code because we want to focus only on the logic of that code.
Yes.
In this place. Yeah. Okay. And because it's Elm, you know that when you make that refactor, it's fearless, right? As they say.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Excellent. And so at this point, we're talking about still, I mean, you've mentioned work and, some of the problems you've solved there, but kind of in your story, we're at this point where you have discovered Elm, you used it on your 4th year project, this ambitious Uber for buses project, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And at this point, you're starting to learn Elm, and had you learned any functional programming before that?
No. I was just getting into it, and that's why I picked up Elm and Elixir. Again, I'll go back to that phrase. It all fit into my head. So these, when the moment you start dealing with references in object-oriented programming, there's this little overhead that comes along where, you know things, but you don't know things. You pass data into a function, you have no clue what's happened. It might have, if it's really low-level languages, it might have been deleted in Swift, Java, Python. It might have, values might have changed inside a rich data structure. If it's Python, the whole thing actually might have disappeared. And there was this simplicity that came with functional programming where kind of the same way you've been learning in school about, here's a function, you give it data, it gives you back some other data. That promise was being fulfilled. It's the thing we were told, the way programs are supposed to work is how they were working in functional programming. So I don't know, I fell in love with functional programming in 4th year, so started using them then.
Okay. Yeah. And I've heard this experience before. The most recent description that this reminds me of is an episode I did with Adriano Ferrari, and kind of talking about the same thing with the mental overload, or the overhead that you have with programming in other languages that don't have the same guarantees that Elm does, right? That don't treat functions as functions, as pure functions. So yeah, you have this, what seems like, I guess, more working memory for your brain to focus on the problem at hand instead of focusing on other things that may come at you and you kind of have to guard against, right?
Yeah.
So you're getting into functional programming. You've made this ambitious project using Elm and Elixir. What happens next?
Let's see. So I joined a small fintech here in Nairobi. They were using Spring, so it was Kotlin, and I would try and sneak in Elm, but the tricky thing with sneaking in Elm is sometimes it doesn't feel like the responsible thing to do unless everyone is bought in. So you can always introduce it, you can always prove that if you work with Elm, you'll be so much more productive. The tricky thing is, just to go off topic, there's this interesting idea I've heard that it's the only thing worse than an overbearing leader is an absent one. So I was finding that in some situations, I would suggest an idea and there wouldn't be pushback. So I'd suggest and it would be okay, which is a scary thing, because you shouldn't be able to introduce a new programming language without some pushback or some thoughts or something, because otherwise a decision isn't being made. It's things are just going. So for while I was there, I kind of stayed away from using Elm, at least at work. I still use it a lot in my free time. But and I guess that ends up being one of the tricky things about Elm, that you can have people who are really bought into it, but there's a huge group of people who will use the simplest, or let me use the word, the most common programming languages. So React is chosen not because it's the best. In fact, usually there's no decision. It's just everyone else is using it. So there's no discussion about trade-off. Is it this versus this? What do we lose? It's always the hiring. What is everyone else using? It's a Facebook language. So for around 8 months, I was working mostly with Kotlin and helping out a team that was working with a bit of React. Then soon after, I went to do my master's, which was full-time. And there I got back a bit of my freedom in that school projects, or school assignments, it's how it looks rather than what it's built with. So no professor is actually going to go and read your code. So again, I got back into this paradigm where there'll be a problem or a project where it's very easy for smaller teams to, other teams or other, if it was group work specifically, for other groups or other individuals in individual assignments to do something very bare bones. But I'll be there on the side with Elm, and because I had gotten used to it, and it's so expressive, I'll build proper dashboards and UIs for a class or an assignment where it has nothing to do with software engineering. So I remember a good example of this is I was working on it was a class having to do with data analytics and some machine learning things. So we're doing we're working with, I think it was predicting which loans are likely to be, which loan applicants are likely to default. And so you're supposed to use an API, and it's supposed to be very simple, just use an API in Python, using Flask, that's supposed to sit on top of the ML. And the ML was supposed to be the main thing. But in a few days, I built this entire dashboard where you could actually put in someone's records, it would do predictions, it would tell you what's the likelihood of this, some nice visualizations on precision and accuracy. So even though I wasn't working on Elm full-time, I was in school, I still found that it would make me extremely productive, and it would make assignments which at times I found a bit boring a lot more exciting, because I could go and build an entire application in a weekend. Anyway, which would really, because it was a stressful time, it would really make my day. Because it's I don't know, I think it's a programmer thing to side projects are a lot more fun than work, even if they have some overlap, but that self-directed learning and creation is really amazing. So while at school, I managed to link up with Drew from Qoda. Actually, I was working on something in elm-charts and saw an issue he had raised, so I picked that up and gave some ideas. We linked up on LinkedIn, and then started working with them while I was finishing my master's.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because I had sent a question to Dwayne Crooks to give me a story about you, and this is kind of the story that he gave. So it's kind of a bit of a paragraph here. So I'll just quickly run through this, and it describes kind of what you're saying from his perspective. Mm-hmm. Quote, I first heard about Nduati through Dhruv. At the time, we were busy working on releasing our first version of Qoda. And one of the many features we wanted to add to the decentralized application was charting. We knew about elm-charts by Tereza Sokol, but I had never used it, and we didn't know if we would be able to use it to build the type of chart we needed. I didn't have the time to experiment and find out, so Dhruv decided to reach out to Tereza via Terezka/elm-charts issues to find out if it was possible to do candlestick charting with the library. The request remained there for a while, until Nduati responded with a gist that prescribed exactly how it could be done. Dhruv was happy with the proposed solution, and he messaged me to tell me all about it. I think they had a few conversations after that, and Dhruv was really impressed with his work enough to come and talk to me about his decision to pursue hiring him. That's how I came to know about Nduati. and eventually working with him, end quote. So is that basically the same way that
Yeah,
So,
I've never heard it from that section.
yeah. So then what was your interest in Tereza's Elm charts? Was this related to the visualization you were talking about?
Yeah. Well, kind of. Well, first I have to say I love the elm-charts library. The library itself is wonderful, but like on top of that, Tereza has put together like some really, really nice documentation, like which walk you through all the charts you could build, how it could be combined. It's really wonderful. So again, going back to campus, or let's say my master's, I was doing ML, but apparently it turns out I like ML like inside software, but not as its own thing. So like I would have classes which would be a bit stressful for me, and not stressful like in the good way programming usually is, where you're struggling with something, you struggle with something, and then you solve it, and like you feel this high, like where you feel great. ML, it's a little less deterministic, so you can work on something for hours and like nothing falls out, which is like a really strange sensation, especially when you're used to like, because in programming you have this thing where if I work long enough on this, maybe if I get some help, it'll work. Like, and usually it almost always works. Anyway, so what would happen is when I'm having like a really slow week at school, I'd go and start doing some things on the side. So for whatever reason, I was really interested in like UIs related to stock markets. So at that point I was looking, okay, can Tereza's library let me draw the candlestick charts? The ones which show like the opening price, closing price. And so I Google candlestick, I see nothing on Tereza's library. But like there's an issue which is open. So it's like, okay, this is useful. And since there's someone else who needs this, let me give it a shot. It was really interesting to do. Had to play around with a few things. But eventually kind of, because of avoiding schoolwork, I found myself talking to Drew, sorting out, like giving a few suggestions on how they could sort out the issue. And yeah, so that's how we met, and he was very kind enough to reach out. So now we get to work together.
Did you start working at Qoda before you had finished your master's?
Yes. This was... So my master's was 2 years, so I joined with Qoda at the beginning of my summer holiday. And the idea was I'll work with them for 3 months, try and finish my schoolwork, and then if they're still interested, we can work later. But I had a really amazing time. And again, going back to this idea of getting feedback, like I found like it's one of the best ways to learn is you do something and then someone tells you, that's not exactly how you should do it. If you can change it in this way, then it'll be perfect. And like go back and think about it again. So the experience of working with Drew and Dwayne, like he gave me this opportunity to do things in Elm and be told, you need to tweak this, you need to tweak this. You need to think about components this way. And so finished working working with them over the summer holiday. For whatever reason, I decided let's just continue this thing. And like by that time, I had said to myself, like if I can spread out my remaining school workload so that like I can continue working part-time, I think that would be in my interest, because like ML is interesting and I'm sure it's the future, but there's this wonderful feeling you get out of programming, which can't be replicated. That immediate feedback of you try something and it succeeds, or you try something, it fails, and then it succeeds. So already I could tell, even if I finish this master's, most likely I'll want not to go into machine learning, but to go into software. And if somewhere down the road, machine learning and I cross paths again, I'll know a few things. So continued working with them, and still working to them to this day.
Excellent. Yeah, and so What is it that you enjoy about using Elm at Qoda?
There's a rigor which, and I don't know if this is because of this is also a Haskell team, but there's a rigor which comes from, which I've come to learn from like doing in Druve. I wasn't very strict before with how I'd like deal with types. So I would kind of come up with anonymous records all over the place. Like they were just types for a very long time, or just vehicles for dealing with data. Like it's like a record was just a really long tuple where a container could pack a piece of data into. And something like I've really come to enjoy with Elm is how easy it is to model types really well. Like one of the things which I love most about Elm is the fact like there are boundaries around the language. JavaScript coming from outside, not JavaScript, JSON coming from outside, unless you really insist on breaking the rules, it has to be sanitized. It has to go through a decoder, which means that like there's a wild west out there, but inside our little circle of Elm, everything is perfect, everything is typed. And so we can try and decode things. If data doesn't match what you expect, we have to handle it. So there's a very nice way of being able to express types by hiding like what's inside a type. So at Qoda, we're building a decentralized app. So it's basically like a financial product that lives on the blockchain. And one of the interesting things about like values on the blockchain is like they're usually really, really long. Like if Bitcoin is now worth something like $20,000, it's like there's a lot of decimals. So like dollars are usually like 2 decimals. Something like Bitcoin, you'll have 18 decimal places. So it's like we have to have special types which are big integers that are coupled together with like a decimal value. So you have 1 to the power 18 as your value, and then 18 decimal places. And then, so if you have an 18 decimal place number whose value is 1 to the power 18, that's like equal to 1 Bitcoin. And you have this thing where you have to add big numbers and be able to subtract them, some lists of them. And if you're just dealing with the big numbers, instead of like dealing with an actual amount type, you lose some type safety where you don't want to be able to add, let's say, Bitcoin and USD. So Elm makes it really easy to like represent things at the compiler level that make it impossible to make certain errors. And then also because you can always encapsulate the type inside a module and only expose like a few functions from that module, like it's really easy to have a type that is safe, not just in terms of like the type safety, but also the usage that you can at the compiler level prevent your team from making certain mistakes. So that plus the fact that like whenever you're dealing with a team of people, compiler safety, like the type system, like makes it so much harder to make mistakes than like a lot of other JavaScript languages. So that like if someone in my team has gone and changed something in a module and I don't know about it because maybe I wasn't like really reading through all the gate changes, if I go and I start treating a type like with the assumption that it's still exactly the same, the compiler will tell me no, you can't use it in that way. So Elm, I think, has made it really easy for us to work as a team and like build out features and make changes, because you can be sure that other members of your team can't assume that, like they can't make certain assumptions that are no longer true of your code.
Right. Yeah, I like that too. You can use the compiler to communicate when things change. Exactly. Right. Yeah, you can't make assumptions and then merge some code in, and then if those assumptions change, you will know it as soon as you run the compiler. Yeah. And then, like you're saying, having these clear boundaries at the edges of Elm is really nice, because that provides the opportunity for you to make nice types and make sure that things make sense inside of Elm, even if the outside world is is not so nice. So
Yeah. And actually, that's one of those things which, especially from our experience at Qoda, it kind of throws away this idea of like Elm won't be enough. So we have a really large code base inside JavaScript. The reason for that is like a lot of the front-end blockchain libraries are in JavaScript. So whenever we have some user interaction, so let's say someone wants to make a transaction, so maybe they want to create a loan or to lend to someone else some of their cryptocurrency, all of that has to be piped through like the JavaScript side of things. And so it's really easy to actually build a very like complete application, even if huge parts of your application code are in JavaScript. And like the ports make it really easy to communicate back and forth. And there's a bit of boilerplate that's there, but like I think it's the boilerplate in Elm, because of the types and the compiler, ends up being all you have to do is implement it well once. And then from that point forward, you just copy paste that module and make the changes. And you forget something, the compiler will tell you, like, this isn't what you expect. I don't know. I'm really happy with Elm and our experience at Qoda. It's made it like really easy to like keep on iterating on a product. Like every few weeks, you might find a page turns out that needs to be changed completely, and it's really easy to just delete code without worrying that it's being used somewhere else. It's really easy to change things because of the type system, and then it turns out to be really, really easy to talk to JavaScript over ports.
Okay. And I know some people have struggled with using ports. And so, yeah, it'd be interesting if you all had some insights to share. I don't know if you followed kind of the pattern that, I don't know if you remember, there was a talk that Murphy Randall gave back at ElmConf 2016, 2017, something like that. The importance of ports, and, you know, kind of described one of these patterns of having a port in and a port out, and then encoding and decoding the values across those, which I thought was a nice pattern that I've used myself, and kind of to that point of like, you know, when you're adding something new, you can kind of copy that process, and then because the Elm type system makes it easy to model things, if your thing is unique, then you can easily, you know, define that model, that type, and then figure out how you need to encode or decode based around. But yeah, I'm curious, because you're doing a lot of this interaction. If there is some unique situations or techniques that you found that might be interesting, I don't know. Maybe you should the team there at Qoda talk with the Elm Radio folks about some of the tools and techniques around using ports, because that might be interesting.
Yeah, I think Dwayne did a post on Elm Discourse a while back, kind of describing this. But essentially, it's kind of what Randall talked about. So, but with a few layers on top. So the way we structure it is we have like a port in and a port out, but we don't talk directly to the ports. So a page never talks to the port directly. In between the page and the port, there's something which we call messages. So a message it's like a request for specific things. So maybe on your loader page, you have get homepage data. And that module for, application.port.message.get home page data, it knows everything about how to encode data. So maybe for, let's say it's a logged in user. So when you request the data and you need the user's ID, so you pass in the user ID to like a message function. And that knows exactly how to wrap that user ID into some JSON value, and it knows exactly which port, where to send it. So whenever we're sending out data, we send like a JSON with a tag, which is like a name of which piece of data we're talking about, and a value. Once it gets to the JavaScript side, we have like a long case switch statement that matches on every possible message that can come out of the Elm side. That calls a function in its own JavaScript file that knows how to pull in all that data. So if there are HTTP requests that have to be made, maybe talking to local storage, it does all of that, and it can either succeed, in which case it returns almost a namespaced version of the request. So if the request was something like get homepage data, you can return get homepage data.error with as a tag and a value with some error, or it can return get homepage data.data and then a value of the actual data. That's returned by that function, and then it gets sent back to Elm. And then the Elm side, the same module that knew how to encode the request to get the homepage data, also knows how to decode a success response or an error response. It knows everything about how to unmarshal this into a proper rich type inside Elm, and then it now pushes it to the page through the subscription. So it sounds like a lot, but once you've done it the first time, from that, if I want now I had to get a settings page data, I'll just copy the home page data file, copy paste it, change the tag name and maybe the data marshalling, and then go to the JavaScript side and add an extra case statement or an extra branch, handle getting the data. So it turns out to be really, once you've done it the first time, it's really easy to do. And it's very easy to reason about. There are very nice ways of being able to log. So, when you're developing, data came out here, it went here, then it disappeared here. And now you can reason through all of that. Yeah. So I don't think I've ever had any real problems with JavaScript interrupt.
Yeah, nice. Okay, and I forgot that Dwayne wrote that post on Discourse. I'll add that link in the show notes so folks can take a look at that. One thing that I wanted to go back to was you had built a couple of sites kind of learning different things, one of them being the Haruki Murakami example site. And were there any challenges that you faced? I know that has a lot of animations in it.
I think the one... So just to describe it to anyone who's listening, it's a simple site. The idea is that there's a list of books. If you click on one of the books, it animates as if, so you have a horizontal list of books. If you click on one of the books, it kind of lifts off the surface of the main page. The other books kind of slide away, and you end up on this new page. And if you now click on that book on that new page, it animates as if the pages are turning. So I think that it was a really interesting project, and a lot of the things I do on the side with Elm, it's more of I want to prove to myself that I can do this, and the idea being that at any point in the future, whenever there is a designer suggests something, it's not this fear that that will kill us if we try and do that. But the one thing I did kind of struggle with there is that animating between pages is almost impossible. So I think Astro 3 has been really showing off inter-page animations, and there have been some proposals I think for Chrome for hero animations between two pages. But at that time in Elm, what I would have to do is inside one file I would have a view function that kind of mixes the state of two pages, and when I'm animating between two pages, I'm kind of hiding some pieces of the page, of the one page, and showing other pieces of the other page. And I don't know, it was a lot of work, but I don't think it's something that would be all that much easier in other programming languages, because you still have to at some point describe how things are going to move, the speed of animations and things like that. Yeah, I don't know. I think it was a software project, and I think it's definitely doable to do really complex UIs and animations in Elm. I don't know. I'm not sure I've answered your question.
Yeah, I think so. So, there's some kind of mixing of models that you have to consider here, because it does animate between these two pages, and different parts of that page are showing or hiding, if I recall correctly.
Yes.
As it's going between them. So yeah, that makes sense. What are you excited about now?
So it's tricky to talk about being excited with Elm, kind of because like one of its greatest strengths is what everyone seems to be complaining about, the fact that it's so unchanging. So one of the things which I really like about Elm is, and I've had people complain like about the 0.18 to 0.19 transition. But in my experience, code I wrote like something like 3 or 4 years ago, I can walk back into it. It's exactly the same. It reads like there's no huge changes. And like some of the things which I'm happiest most about Elm end up coming out of libraries. So like Tereza's elm-charts library came out not of some huge change to the language, but someone spending time to build something beautiful. So the thing which I'm excited about Elm is, it's a boring thing, but it's the stability. It's the fact that I can always come back to code bases that I wrote a while back, even team projects that you build something and then you walk away from it. So maybe an admin dashboard, and for once there's no real reason to change things. And then a feature request comes in, you walk into the code base and everything feels like all the other code you're writing all over the place. But I'm excited about Elm staying the same, which isn't a popular opinion, but there's a power to be able to always understand what's been written in a code base, being able to steal code from other people online, because you don't need to worry about which version of React or Vue are they using, was it the functional style or components. Like there's a lot of decisions which I don't have to make, because Elm is pretty much stable, and it's no longer a cost I have to pay whenever working with Elm, knowing about types and versions and all that.
Yeah, I like that. That's well put. Not a cost that you have to pay. I feel that for sure. And, not having that mental overhead, that load of thinking about, will this work with the version that I have? Because, the change hasn't been since, 2019. So the language is very stable. It allows us to continue to keep our projects going, introduce code from an old project into a new project, and make it just seamless, because there's no significant change. There's not a difference in the style. Well, it's funny that we were talking about that pattern of using ports, right? And this was something that was talked about 6 years ago. In terms of JavaScript world, that is an eternity, generally. That the amount of change that could happen in that time period, you would think, well, that code is just trash, but Elm doesn't suffer from that. The stability means that you can leave something and not worry that when you come back to it, you're going to have to make a whole bunch of changes just to get back to where you were when you left.
And actually, this is like a huge thing, even outside like JavaScript itself, even the bundlers. So there was Webpack, then Parcel, then ESBuild, then Bun. And like for us, forever, it's been Elm Make. And like it all just works. And there's a lot of simplicity to that, because there are no decisions to be made. And the ones which were made at some point by Evan, a lot of them turned out to be really good. So,
Yeah, for sure. I mean, they're good because they continue to work, and we haven't had to have changes in such a long time. So, what picks do you have for us today, Nduati?
So I'm sure these are well known in Elm, but I'll still share them. The first is an old article from 2019 called Pass.Validate by Alexis King. And it discusses this idea that's really common in Haskell and applicable to pretty much every programming language, of converting types. So if you have data coming from outside, maybe the user, instead of confirming that the data matches a requirement, the idea is that you, instead of doing that validation, making sure that it's certain conditions are true, you do that and then convert it into a new type. So instead of having an email as a string, you could wrap it into an email type. So that from that point forward, you know that within the language, and this is especially useful in Elm, everywhere that you have like that email type, you know this is a valid email string. So that's something I really like, and it makes it much easier to like reason about your code, because it's not a bunch of strings everywhere. You have an email type here, you have an amount type there, and I love that. The second is an article called Drag and Drop Without Draggables, but it's from around 4 years ago from No Red Ink. And this is one of the articles which I love because it kind of shows, my experience with Elm is that with a lot of other programming languages, it feels like you don't actually get to touch your system, if you can put it that way. So whenever you're dealing with JavaScript, drag and drop libraries, you're always touching something which actually touches the system. So this article kind of describes how you can build drag and drop systems where you keep track of the click down events, move events, and then the mouse up events. And what I really love about that is like it's really easy to build really complex UIs, because instead of you handing off to like some HTML drag and drop tooling, you're the one who you can implement the whole thing. So you have special behavior that you want to build into the application. So maybe something that's picked up on this side of the page can't be dropped on this other side of the page. It's very easy to build that yourself. That's my second pick. And my last pick is just to encourage people who, like myself, don't like HTML or aren't comfortable with all the flexbox and all that, to look into elm-ui. It's probably well known in Elm already, but I found for a developer who's not ready to go all the way into CSS, still learning things, it's a very good way to learn the web without having to learn CSS and all the 20, 50 ways of doing the same exact thing. So that'll be my third pick.
Excellent. Yeah, all great picks. The parse don't validate, I just want to make a comment about that. That makes me think back to our conversation about boundaries, right? Because that's a lot of what that's doing, is not just letting those values in. You're making some guarantees based on how you let those values in. And that goes a lot to what Dylan and Jeroen say on Elm Radio, where they talk about opaque types and the same idea of parse don't validate. So yeah, that's great. And I had a question about this drag and drop one, because you mentioned earlier that you were working on this 4th year project, and one of the features was to be able to drag the tire, for example, and move it over to another part of the form. Was this an article that you used to implement that, or?
Yes, yeah, it was. The thing that I love about it is how straightforward it is to implement. And maybe this is something we should have mentioned earlier, but I've also had experience with, I had a small application I was working with where we had data coming in XML, and it needed to be like passed into some JSON structure. And it turned out to be like a very nice user experience to be able to just paste in the XML on this side, paste in the target JSON on this side, and then just drag and drop the values from the XML to the JSON. And like have the backend figure out how to do the JSON, the XML parsing, the JSON parsing, and then how to match between the two. So I think drag and drop can be a really intuitive way of letting people like connect different parts of the app. Yeah, and in Elm, there are a few like watch outs about making sure you're not like, if someone lets go or their mouse goes out of the screen, you're aware of that. But it's like surprisingly easy, even for like a novice programmer, to implement like really complex UIs with drag and drop.
Excellent. Yeah, and then I guess I should probably comment on elm-ui. It's just so nice to be able to use that if you can. And so, yeah, a great way to learn. And if you can use that instead, it's intuitive to think about and not be thinking about weirdness with layout and weirdness with styles. So, yeah, all great picks. I just have one pick today. I don't think I've picked it before. It's Elm Doc Preview. I use it at work for our internal application documentation. So a lot of the modules that we have, we reuse in different parts of the app. And so I want to be able to share that, make those things easily discoverable for folks who are new to the program or to the system, or even for myself, if I haven't used a particular module in a while, I want to go check it out and remember what's available here and how do I use it. So
hearing about Elm Doc Preview kind of reminds me of an issue I've had a few times about how Elm doesn't let you kind of set up private libraries. And I think, so there's a combination of things which like makes that not an issue. So in Elm, using like relative path directory, you can say, if this is your main application and in a nearby directory, like your library exists, you can go into your elm.json, it's say the sources, you can list that directory as like one of the sources. So it's very easy to bring in, if you have private libraries, just set up a Git repository for it, you clone that repository near your current project, and then you can import in pretty much all the modules for that existing library. But now with Elm Doc Preview, it's very easy to additionally provide kind of private documentation for your private libraries. You still end up getting the full experience which you get from Elm. So good documentation and an easy way to import in your private libraries.
yeah, that's a great point. We'll definitely add a link to the Elm Doc Preview side. And so if folks want to use that for their private libraries in addition to their application documentation, then they can do that. Excellent. Thanks to all the folks listening out there. Please rate and share if you're enjoying the podcast. And thanks, Nduati, for coming to Elm Town.
Thanks for having me, Jared.